Welcome to SarderTV. I'm Vaishali Jain. We have the pleasure of having Andrea Procaccino with us today. Andrea is the Chief Learning Officer of NewYork-Presbyterian Hospital in New York City, one of the largest healthcare providers in the U.S. and also one of the top 10 hospitals in the country. And as a learning leader, she's here to tell us about challenges and trends in the learning industry. Andrea, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
So tell us about your role as Chief Learning Officer at NewYork-Presbyterian Hospital and what you're responsible for.
So as Chief Learning Officer, I am responsible for all learning for all of our employees in all of the NYP hospitals. So we do everything from leadership and management training, onboarding, compliance training. We do clinical systems, we do talent management, employee engagement, team development, team diagnostics, rewards and recognition, and all of our appreciation events for the employees. So really the whole gamut for anybody that's an NYP employee.
So that includes doctors as well?
Well, the physicians report into the two medical schools that we sit in between. So we sit in between Columbia University and Weill Cornell Medical College. And our physicians report into both of the medical schools. However, because they're in our hospitals, there is a number of things that we have to teach them. That's kind of the price of admission, if you will, for working in one of our facilities. So we do some work with the physicians. And when we are training teams or clinical units together, obviously the physicians are going to be part of that. It's a really great partnership we have with them.
So how many employees would you say you're responsible for creating
We are
learning
responsible for about 35,000 employees. So there's quite a number of hospitals that we have in our main NYP hospitals as well as our regional hospital network. Okay. So it's growing all the time.
So you've been with NewYork-Presbyterian for about 2 years.
Yes.
Prior to this, you were at Johnson & Johnson and Avon.
Yes.
What are some of the biggest differences in the way organizations like Johnson & Johnson and Avon, more consumer products organizations, approach learning versus NewYork-Presbyterian Hospital or like a nonprofit?
You know, having been in the for-profit world and then moved into the not-for-profit world, what was interesting about my positions at Johnson & Johnson and Avon was that I had global responsibility. So we were dealing not only with the regulations of the United States, being in a pharmaceutical regulated environment, but also all the different countries in which we operated in. So that was very interesting. And as you can imagine, when you're dealing with employees from 40-some countries, you have all the cultural nuances. So that was very interesting in how we had to approach learning. We almost had to build the learning several different ways before we delivered it, depending on where it was going. Whereas here at NewYork-Presbyterian, we are all in the New York City tri-state area. And what I love about NewYork-Presbyterian is something very different from a for-profit organization where you're very driven by the numbers, especially in a consumer goods company. Here at NewYork-Presbyterian, we are so focused on the patient, and everything we do is for that patient and putting that patient first. So it's very mission-driven learning, very mission-driven organization, and I just find that people come to the learning at NewYork-Presbyterian not because they have to, but because they want to. It's really a great relationship that we have with our learners. They want to learn because they want to do the best possible for that patient. So to me, that's what's one of the real exciting things about our organization.
What are the business objectives you're trying to align learning with, working with a not-for-profit organization? So
as a hospital, and we are one of the top hospitals in the United States, we are number 7 on the U.S. News and World Report. We're real proud about that. As I said, we put the patient first. And in putting the patient first, everything we do, all of our strategies are aligned to that patient, having the best patient experience for not only the individual who's coming for treatment at our hospital, but their entire family. So making it a real good experience so that they feel part of their care, that we're communicating with them, that we're treating them with empathy and kindness. So we're really focused on that. That's one of our big strategic goals, as well as you can imagine with a hospital, quality outcomes. So we want to make sure that we're delivering the highest quality care as well as the best patient experience. And it's all about that. Everything we do has that at our focus. And we're also, one of our other strategic goals is to continue to grow our organization and make sure that we're expanding the outreach and access of our care.
So you're aligning learning with business objectives that are very different
Absolutely.
than
Absolutely.
working with the for-profit organization.
Right. So when I was at Avon, it was about driving sales. So as you can imagine, getting your products out there, driving sales, increasing sales skills. At Johnson & Johnson, it was about the process of drug development as I sat in the R&D end of the pharmaceutical arm of the company, and it was very focused on that and getting our drugs to the FDA to get approved, to get to market. Whereas here, it's really all about that patient, and it's everything to do with that patient, the best quality care we can give them, the best patient experience, and making sure we're really there for them and their family.
Tell us what your learning goals are for the organization.
We want to make sure that we are having our learners have change behaviors. So it's really all about the culture change, the behavior change that we need for that sustained behavior change. So we're imparting knowledge and skills, but not just for that situational moment of the learning event. It's really about sustaining that back in the units, back in the departments, back in the hospital. So we're looking at really driving the learning for that behavior change, for that culture change, and we're looking at different learning styles, we're looking at different generational styles and how we do that, and we're also looking at the different modalities to keep it fresh, to keep the learner engaged. So our goals are really behavior change first and foremost, and then engaging the learner, because if you engage the learner, they're going to have greater retention and sustain that learning back on the units, back in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about what some of the most unique aspects of your learning development programs are at the hospital.
Well, it's real exciting. I have the most incredible team of professionals that I work with. Very, very blessed that way. And we're always looking to innovate the learning and bring cutting-edge technologies, cutting-edge methodologies into the learning itself. So we're excited about the uniqueness in that our learners are always wondering what's going to come next. What are we going to try next? So we're using gamification to kind of drive behavior change and grow retention. We're looking at building virtual worlds so that we can engage learners in a different way. We are blending in simulation, whether it's simulation using technology or face-to-face situations, and really just driving the fun and engagement and putting that in learning. We're also embedding a lot of neuroscience research into how the brain works, into how we're going to have that learner presented with the materials, how we're going to reintroduce it, how we're going to keep showing that material to the learner so that they will remember it and use it and change their behaviors back on the units, back in the department. So for us, it's really exciting it's not your grandmother's learning, so to speak. We're really looking at different technologies, different methodologies to keep it fresh.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been doing this now? Some of these newer methods?
Well, I'd say in the last year and a half, we've really kicked up the innovation, and it was a fun challenge that we gave the learning teams here at New-York-Presbyterian, and they embraced it wholeheartedly. And we told them sky's the limit. Let's innovate. It has to meet the learning objectives. It has to meet the learning goals, and we've gotten a lot of excitement built in the hospital. So that's been fun for us. It's been fun for the learners, and it keeps them coming back for more. Mm-hmm. But with that, it's a double-edged sword. You have to keep innovating. So, we're always staying on top of what's the newest and the latest, and how will that work to meet the learning objectives.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's key, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of organizations struggle with that. They want to do the latest and greatest, but it doesn't always align with business goals or learning objectives. They just
has
want to try.
it has to really be the right methodology or the right technology to enhance the learning. You don't want to just put in the bells and whistles to say, wow, look at that, and it's new and it's shiny, isn't it great? It has to really be impactful, and it has to be the right technology to deliver the learning, or the right methodology that's really going to capture the learning objectives and meet your learning objectives and ultimately change that behavior in the learner.
So you've been using some of these newer technologies for about a year and a half or so.
At New-York-Presbyterian,
Yes, at New York.
I've used them in previous organizations as well.
What would you say has worked and what hasn't?
It's interesting. I think the gamification is really starting to take on a life of itself. I've used it in previous organizations, and the first time you introduce gamification of any sort to an organization, you'll have different pockets of the organization that'll grasp it very quickly, and others that'll wait and see, because it's new and it's different. I have to say it's been very, very well received. I think because we're such an innovative organization to begin with, we're so innovative in our science and our medical techniques that it was a more likely fit than perhaps some of the other organizations I've worked for. So I think that has worked really, really well. What's always the challenge in a hospital environment is that we want to make sure that we are matching the learning to the way our learners work. So we don't want to pull them out of the hospital units, as you can imagine, for 8 hours at a time. You know, they have patients to take care of. So we're really focused on what's the best way to present the learning, but yet preserve their work environment. So that's why we're looking at, you know, tablets, mobilely driven modules, mobile access simulations, gamification, because we want the learning to code to the bedside with our employees so that it's right there when they need it and they can take care of our patients. So for us, it's always marrying, yes, that may be great to do in an 8-hour class, but is that realistic for a doctor or a nurse coming off an ICU unit? Or do we want to pull somebody out of the, you know, neonatal ICU for that long? No.
How are millennials driving the use of some of these newer, more innovative approaches?
You know, it's something you have to always stay on top of. So we have 4 generations in the workplace now, soon to be 5. And our millennials learn very different than our baby boomers, our Gen Xers. So we have to, and there's still some traditionalists in our organization as well. So we have to make sure that it's not one size fits all. They are more apt to pick up their mobile phone and they're going to want things in bite-sized chunks of learning where and when they need it. They're not going to sit down for 8 hours at a time. So we're looking at micro-learning where you're creating little microbursts of learning, and it's maybe a little bit of training on a topic. It could be video, it could be a mobile simulation, it could be something delivered via a mobile device. They're also going to want to have the ability to share with one another. So after a learning event or a learning cohort, we always create some type of social community for them, whether it's having them tweet through the class or creating a Facebook page for that cohort of learners, because they want to be able to share back and forth. We're also looking at how we can have them capture learning on their phone. Here's how I'm using what I learned. I want to post this out for everybody else. I want to blog about whatever topic it is we're talking about. So we're really very conscious about that social peer-to-peer learning piece, as well as how do we deliver it via device in a way that's going to fit around how they work, where they work. We also know millennials want learning when and where they want it. So, you know, if somebody's sitting on a subway, they can put their headphones in and look at their device, or go home and, you know, look at it on their tablet, or, you know, if they're in one of the break rooms in the hospital, that it's accessible there. So it's really looking at that microbursts of learning, using the device, and that creation of a social community.
Do you feel that baby boomers and traditionalists and even Gen Xers have taken to this newer, more innovative approach?
You know, I think they're coming along. I always laugh. My 84-year-old mother texts all the time now, and I've got her Googling. So I always use her as a test pilot on a lot of things. But I think that they're becoming more adept at it. When you start seeing grandparents texting children in college, is interesting. We do a lot of work through partnership with the University of Central Florida's Simulation Institute for Simulation and Training, just a very, very innovative group that's really at the forefront of learning technologies. And one of the latest statistics they told me, you know, you would think, what is the greatest use of device? What population's greatest use of device? It's 65 and above. So you've got grandparents trying to engage their grandchildren or these younger generations. So I'm really seeing that the different generations are picking up on this technology, not maybe as rapidly as a millennial would, but they're not adverse to it at all. Yeah. You know, because they may have children, a lot of things it's just easier, and it fits in around how they work.
Talk a little bit about how you think globalization and technology are changing the way learning is taking place within organizations.
So I think it's the shelf life of learning is changing dramatically, whereas you might have developed a course and maybe once or twice a year you were looking at that program. Now you have to keep that content so fresh because they can access it like that. So you have to keep it very, very fresh because they can access it when and where they want it. And if it's dated content, they're not going to come back. So I think it's caused learning departments to look at how quickly they refresh the content, how quickly they're able to refresh the content. So, you know, you have to look at resource implications. It has to look at how you build the content. If you're going to deliver it via technology, how quickly you can change it. It's all about agility. When I think about learning, I think that's one of the most important things for a learning organization now, is to be agile and flexible enough to meet the demands of an ever-changing workforce, to meet technology demands, and to meet content demands.
So you've already been working with some of these newer technologies when it comes to learning. Do you think that they're going to be real disruptors in the learning industry?
For me, disruption's a good thing. I think we always have to shake it up a little bit and keep it fresh. So are they going to be disruptors? Absolutely. But I think they're going to be good. I think change is good. You can't stay the same, and our work environment is changing. Our world is changing, even in healthcare. Healthcare is changing almost on an hourly basis. So these technologies are allowing us to be agile and flexible enough to meet the changing work environments. So yes, I think they are disruptors, but I think they're necessary disruptors.
And so with so many changes going on with technology, globalization, content, how can leaders influence this change and drive it forward within their organizations?
You know, I think we have to look at how we're resourcing learning organizations. So, you know, in an environment where any industry you're in nowadays is cost conscious. So we have to look at the right resources in a learning department. So there needs to be resourcing for the newest, latest, greatest technology, so that our development technologies allow us the speed to change things rapidly. If you can't resource your department that way, then there needs to be the right funding to be able to go to outside contractors and to do it. We're very fortunate in New York-Presbyterian that we have a great team of content developers, both for face-to-face classroom learning as well as technology. And it's really all about thinking ahead, knowing that we have to constantly keep the content current. What type of technologies are we using to develop? And does it give us the speed to do that? And are we resourced appropriately? So that's something that I'm always juggling with. Do we have the right capital requirements? Do we have the right people, the right skills? And if not, can I bring those skills in and upskill our department, or is this something that we need to purchase? So I think that's one of the things that we're seeing, this new demand kind of putting a little bit of a strain on the learning departments.
How much of your learning is now classroom-based?
It's never going to go away. I think it's very important. I think what's important is the blend. You're never going to go automatically just to technology. There's still that need for the face-to-face interaction and practicing of skills and getting that feedback, especially when you're talking about some of the leadership skills or some of the soft skills. I would say we are probably at almost a 50-50 split now. I think we're starting to see the technology increase more and more. I'd say we were probably a couple years ago maybe at 70-30, 60-40. I'm starting to see it half and half now.
I would assume that some of the content that you're teaching as a medical institution would require face-to-face.
Well, and
right?
even that, and the regulations are changing. So I'm used to being in a regulated environment from Johnson & Johnson, as well as, to a certain extent, the cosmetic industry. And, you know, I'm used to that constantly changing. But, you know, our processes change, regulations change, medicine is changing. There's new requirements on hospitals. You know, there's new changing demands of healthcare in general. So we have to make sure that our employees have the right skills and behaviors. So we have to, you know, again, it comes all back to agility and flexibility. So yes, we have to be able to change the learning and change the content to meet whether it's a process change, a regulation change, or a skill change that's needed.
You also mentioned that you use talent assessments to develop more personalized learning. Tell us more about that.
You know, it's an exciting area. I always would liken it to personalized medicine, where you're looking at someone's genetic makeup and looking to see how you then treat what you're finding. It's the same thing. So we're looking at it strictly for development purposes. You want to do assessments to see, you know, where someone's strengths are, where someone's opportunities are, and then build the development plan specifically to those development opportunities. So we're using different instruments such as a 360 instrument. We are using a very exciting tool, a learning agility assessment, to look at how agile someone is in a new or first-time challenging situation. And we're also using some Hogan personality assessments to really see what is the right personality profile for this job. Some jobs are very stressful, high stress, high impact. They call for a certain type of individual. So it helps us to really develop people for what it is that they want to do and what our organization needs. So it's a real exciting approach rather than taking people and I call it sheep dipping them, kind of dipping them in the learning and everybody's getting the same thing. It's really taking these assessments and figuring out what does someone need to ultimately be as successful as possible.
So how do you manage that in an organization with 35,000 people that you're managing?
So you're not going to do it on everyone, obviously. So we look at critical positions, key positions that are really very, very important to the strategic goals of the organization. We also look at high potentials. So we'll start there and look at someone that's been identified as a high potential individual or someone in a very critical role. And that's typically where we'll do the assessments to develop them appropriately.
What have been some of the biggest changes you've incorporated into the learning and development program since you've been at New York Presbyterian?
I think one of the things I'm most excited about, the team they're just an amazing, amazing group of learning professionals. I can't speak highly enough about them. And for me, it was shifting their focus a little bit. So it was uniting them as a team and really having them approach the learning or approach the clients from a holistic view. So instead of just saying, well, we need to teach them this, whether it's X, Y, or Z, and our training and development group going in saying, okay, great, we're going to design classroom training. It's taking a step back and looking at what is the situation. So what is the current performance? What is the performance we want it to be? Yes, there's a learning component, but what's the performance support component afterwards? What are the things we need to do to sustain learning? So I think one of the biggest changes that I've made since I joined New York Presbyterian is, like I said, this holistic view, and it's really an integrated continuum. So instead of looking at things episodically as just a learning event, really what is the learning continuum for that organization, for that class of learners, for that function, for that department. So that's one thing we've done. Also, expanding the technologies. So we've been introducing mobile, introducing gamification, looking at micro-learning, building virtual worlds. So bringing new technologies in and really engaging learners in very different ways. We've also brought neuroscience in, so how the brain works. So designing learning to fit how our brains work so that we can retain the learning. And I think just giving it a fresh face, to use my experience at Avon, gave it a little bit of a makeover.
What are some of the challenges that you face when it comes to implementing
all those
some
things?
of these?
So we are an ever-growing regional hospital network. So as we build learning solutions, they have to be adaptable and scalable, knowing that it's not just the 6 main New York Presbyterian hospitals now. We have to be able to scale them out to our regional hospital network, which is growing all the time. So that's a big challenge that we have. I mentioned that, the different workforces coming in, so I want to make sure that I'm engaging learners, all different styles of learning, all different generations of learners, that there are cultural nuances, that we work in this wonderful city, and there's even the culture of our learners is very different. So we have to make sure that we're meeting as many type of learning styles as possible. And it's just the ever-changing speed of it. It's making sure that we're meeting the goals of it, and ultimately that we're changing behaviors. That's what keeps me up at night. I want to make sure that our learning is really having the impact, and we're always looking at that. Is it having the impact it needs to? Are we changing behaviors? Because we're not making bicycle parts. So we're treating human lives. So it's very mission driven, and we don't take that lightly. And it's always, everything we do, we go back to the learner. We always draw a body in the middle of a page when we're brainstorming in the learning department, and we'll draw like a little stick figure, and we put that at the middle when we're doing our brainstorming ideas off of that, to make sure, is it ultimately providing the best for that patient? And we never lose sight of that. So that's always a challenge for us, making sure that whatever we do puts that patient first, puts our learners first so that they can put the patient first. So we take that very serious.
And how are you measuring learning outcome, whether your programs have been successful?
So multiple ways. We use the Kirkpatrick model. It's tried and true, and it's a really solid model. So we're looking at the various levels. So we're looking at, are we transferring knowledge? What's the immediate reaction to training? Are we transferring the knowledge? Whether we're doing knowledge checks, whether we're doing something where you have to be observed and get feedback right away, or if there's quizzes or testing or knowledge checks. We're also looking at what is the impact back on the job. So we'll be doing impact surveys, we'll be doing impact interviews with the learner, with their supervisor. We're also then taking it to the next level, and depending on the program and what the behavior change needs to be, we're looking at the metrics. So what are the metrics before we do the learning? What are the metrics of that function or of that process after the learning? And are we seeing a change? So are we impacting the business, if you will, of that unit, of that function?
Okay, Andrea, we want to now get your thoughts on how you build a learning organization. So start off by defining what a learning organization is to you.
So a learning organization to me is a group of highly engaged, highly innovative, highly creative, highly strategic individuals that are very aligned to the mission and vision of the organization and are there to really impact the organization by providing the necessary knowledge and skills that that organization needs to be successful in meeting its strategic goals, whether that's learning a process or a skill or a behavior, such as different type of leadership topics. And I've done this numerous times. It's actually the most fun thing I get to do in my career. It's how do you take the talent that's there? And I've been very blessed with always having very talented teams, but I gotta tell you, the one at NewYork-Presbyterian, they're amazing. And it's taking that talent and multiplying it. And when I say multiplying, I don't mean increasing headcount or increasing resources. I mean, how do you increase the talent that resides in each and every person and just maximize it and unleash it and just let it go for the good, for the good of the organization. So it's getting to know your learning teams, getting to see where your strengths and opportunities are, where the gaps are, filling in the gaps, upskilling where you need to, and really just cultivating that talent. I spent so much time getting to know a team when I first went to NewYork-Presbyterian, getting to know this team of amazing learning professionals and really see where the strengths and opportunities are, where I needed to either build the talent internally or bring it from external, whether it's getting somebody that understands gamification or can design for gamification, or bringing somebody in that's a team development specialist, whatever the case may be. But it's really unleashing that talent within someone. And there's a great book that I love called Multipliers by Liz Weissman, and I'm a real disciple of that, and it's really all about that. How do you multiply that talent? Because it's amazing what you can do. I also liken it to a garden. You've got incredibly beautiful, strong, hardy plants and perennials. Sometimes you need to just turn the soil a little bit, put the sun on it, feed it different food, and let it grow. And that's, to me, is how I kind of approach it. I'm also a firm believer of creating a sense of team and a sense of community. So I'll spend a lot of time with a team, letting them get to know each other. When you know someone and you can start building those relationships with someone that you work alongside every day in times of stress or in times of critical nature, they kind of lock arms and will go for it. And I'm really, really proud of this team. We take that very serious. We do it on an ongoing basis. And, it's fun for us that, we celebrate each other's successes. We build each other up. And doesn't mean it's always rosy and perfect. We're like a family. Sometimes liken us to a big Italian family. We eat, we're happy, we go back and we eat some more. We may have some bumps and bruises, but at the end of the day, you sit down at the table and you eat together and it's all good. And we have a lot of fun.
How big is your team?
We have about 45 people. We are growing our team, which is very exciting. As our regional network grows, we're growing our team. So. We're very lucky that NewYork-Presbyterian believes in learning so much and supports learning in the organization the way it does.
How do you build a learning culture within the organization, and what behaviors are you promoting?
It's all about working with the senior team. This sounds kind of Pollyanna-ish, but I'm really blessed at New York-Presbyterian. The senior leaders, right up from our CEO and our executive vice president, they believe in learning, they support learning, and our senior management team is committed to it. I think because we are an academic medical institution, so when you have that word academic at the front, it kind of insinuates already that, learning is very important. We sit between two academic institutions, as I said, the Columbia Medical School and the Weill Cornell Medical College. And already there's that frame of reference that learning is vital, knowledge is vital, that we're in a changing environment, that we always have to keep pace with that. Our senior leadership also is very supportive of growing talent, and talent's very important. That's how we keep that patient first. That's how we build our employees to put the patient first. So I stepped into an organization that was so aligned and in tune with the impact of learning and understands it. So I didn't have to do as much education as one would do around the learning process or what learning could do. They're very, very supportive. And the fact that we're making it fun and engaging our learners is just helping us to continually build that learning culture. I don't think you're ever there. You never reach a day where you go, ding, we're a learning culture. I think it's something that just continually grows and strengthens, but I'm really, really excited about New York-Presbyterian as a whole is just so focused on learning and so focused on continuing to be the best and to grow our skills that it's not a kind of a steep mountain to climb.
So then how do you develop learning plans for individuals and teams and for the organization as a whole?
I look at our learning team as consultants in a way as well. So we're there as strategic partners. I always tell the different internal clients or the different departments we work in at NYP, they're there to tell me what, I'm there to tell them how. So it's really this partnership working together, getting to understand them. So we'll go in and, you're meeting with them, you're talking with them, we'll do focus groups, we'll shadow, we'll get a feel for what's going on currently in the organization. We'll look at their metrics. We'll look at, what are some of the barriers that they're having to achieving the metrics they want, and really looking at it from different angles. How do they work? Just following them around to see, oh my goodness, they never sit down. They're never at a computer. So e-learning may not work for them if they're running around all day. Oh wow, but they're working on tablets all day. So okay, maybe that's a way to deliver it. And wow, they don't even have time to grab a cup of coffee. I can't expect them to sit down for 8 hours. So it's really kind of immersing yourself in understanding your client and figuring out what the current situation is, what they want the future state to look like, what is the knowledge and skill that we have to impart on them, and then what's the best way to do that, fitting in with how they work, where they work, what an average day looks like, what type of technology they have or what the constraints are, and then we come up with a consolidated plan. Typically, we'll come up with options for someone. So I love to give our clients multiple options, and then they can fit in, what's the best option for them.
So then what about competency modeling? What's your approach to developing competency
so
models?
Excited to talk about competency, something near and dear to my heart. In the past year at New York-Presbyterian, we worked with Korn Ferry to create a leadership competency framework. So I liken this to building a house. So if we're going to build a house of leaders at NYP, you really have to build the foundation first. And the foundation is these leadership competencies. So we worked with Korn Ferry and used the Lominger competencies, and we did focus groups throughout the organization, all different functions, all different levels, all our different campuses. And we found what are the 5 competencies that everyone in New York-Presbyterian has to exhibit. Things like driving engagement, ensuring accountability. So we now have 5 competencies that everyone across the house has to have. And then there are 5 leadership competencies on top of that, depending on your level. Everyone from an individual contributor up to a senior vice president has 10 competencies. So we've just launched those at the end of last year, and we're continuing to build awareness and education around what those competencies are, what they look like in the workplace, and how to build them. And we're real excited. So we're building off of that a people development architecture so that there are leadership development programs at every level in the organization. And again, these competencies are kind of that safety net, that foundation that goes across all of that.
So we want to get your thoughts on some of the skills gap issues that organizations are facing, specifically in technology. Do you feel like there's a skills gap issue when it comes to hiring for technology-specific roles, IT-specific roles?
I'm not involved in as much of the hiring aspects of it. That's handled by a different group in my organization. But obviously, then those groups will come to me. I don't know that it's so much as a technological skill gap. The area I think most companies are facing, whether it's a healthcare company or a consumer goods company, is leadership. Leadership skills, to me, is the one area I see as the biggest area of focus. It's not so much the technical skills as, we're seeing universities are really driving building technology skills, from the undergraduate level on. But it's more so kind of those soft skills, those leadership skills. That's where I see it. No matter what organization I've been with, that seems to be an area of focus.
And why do you think that skills gap exists?
I think it's because the world changes. The world changes, the demand on people changes, the environments we work in, the communities we work in, the constraints, the political constraints, the economic strains are so different and changing that it's always going to call for a different skill gap, or if you will. To me, the biggest thing is building agile leaders. So because the world is changing at such a rapid clip, probably a lot faster than it has many years ago in the past, where you built leaders a certain way, now we have to build leaders to be so highly agile and adaptable, because you never know what's going to come at you. So that, to me, is where I really see things as a gaps, and it's something that we're focusing on, really building that agility in leaders.
Do you think that something can be done to our education system to help fill that?
It's interesting. So I have a 20-year-old in college, and I'm always fascinated as to how institutions of learning, of higher education, are approaching learning compared to when I went to school, not to date myself. Instead of going about it as, textbook read, take a test, go in the class, do a lab, get a grade, they're really starting to drive the skills that we want to see in the workplace more so educationally. So my son's at Bentley University, and I can speak for them. They're building these social communities, they're working in teams, they're giving them skills about how to communicate with one another, how to coach and give each other feedback. When they do a group project, they do mini performance reviews on everybody in the team. So I'm seeing this approach to the business world starting to infiltrate in a great way kind of undergraduate education and master's level graduate education, and it's better preparing people for the workplace, and they're able to hit the ground running in a different way. When I went to college, no one told me about how to do performance evaluation. No one told me about how to drive accountability or engage learners, or how to coach and give feedback to someone. Whereas, I just had a conversation with my son, and he's telling me about, how he's learning to really coach and give feedback to drive performance in a group setting. That's amazing. So I think we're really starting to build this next generation of workforce in a different way, and that's exciting to see.
Now, Andrea, we want to get some of your thoughts on women in the workplace, and particularly women in leadership positions. What would you say is the biggest institutional obstacle to women in leadership positions?
I have a different perspective on that. At New-York-Presbyterian, when you look at our executive team, we have a great representation of women at the highest echelons of leadership in our hospital. And we're very fortunate that way. So more so than any organization I've ever been at. So at New-York-Presbyterian, I don't look at it that way. Like, what do I have to do as a woman? It's about talent. And it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. And I think we're really focused on that. And when you look at our executive vice president of the hospital, the COO of all of New-York-Presbyterian is a woman. The chief financial officer is a woman. The chief legal counsel is a woman. The chief communications officer is a woman. I can keep going on and on. Chief operating officers of campuses of hospital are women. Heads of the hospital are women. We see women in the chiefs of service, the different service lines. It's fascinating for me. I've always been very blessed, whether it was Johnson & Johnson or Avon, which is the company for women, that's their tagline. I, as a woman, have never felt that I was being held down in any way. So I'm very blessed that way. And, you know, I'm very proud of New York Presbyterian. Like I said, when you look at the makeup of our executive team, I'm very proud of the representation of women. And it's taken very seriously, and we make sure that, you know, do we have the right representation and building that very inclusive environment. And it's interesting, I went to an all-women's college, so I was always very focused on this. You know, it was something that was important for me. I haven't really felt that in my career. And I've had amazing female role models, whether it was at J&J or here at New York Presbyterian. They're just incredible female leaders who take the time to nurture that and share their experience and mentor other women. It's not been something that I felt like I've had to deal with that much. I've been I realize I'm very fortunate, and I realize a lot of people may not have the same experience as me, but we've got some great women role models at New York Presbyterian.
So tell us how role models and mentors have helped you shape your career.
I think it's all about that relationship building and the learning from a mentor, and I always urge people to find a mentor, and I always make sure that I'm acting as a mentor and that I seek a mentor out myself. I've had tremendous role models throughout my career. When I was at Johnson & Johnson, there was someone very near and dear to my heart. She mentored me from, you know, kind of the young out of college, and was always there to talk with me and guide me and be that person that I'm not working for directly, that I can have that conversation with. And I realized how busy she was, but how free of her time she was. And having that as a gift, and what she always taught me was, you have to give that back as well. So I'm giving you that gift. Now you have to turn around and pay it forward and give that gift to someone else. So I think it's real important in your career to find that person that has the traits that you want to emulate, or has a skill that you want to grow yourself that you can learn from. You know, I have that at New York Presbyterian as well. It's nice to have someone to bounce ideas off of and talk to, but I always tell everyone the same thing that I learned. If you're given that gift, it is a gift. You need to be open and receptive to it and learn from it, but you need to pay it forward as well.
Well, thank you so much, Andrea. This was great. We're out of time, but thank you so much.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for today. We'll see you next time on SarderTV.